Hello and welcome to Talk Truth. My name is Corey Huntsper. I've got my father, Alan Huntsper, in the studio, and Dad, we're giving away a free booklet because you're going to need it. It's called The Living Stone, A Journey of Transformation. This booklet helps build your life on the solid rock, Jesus Christ. You're going to need it for the future. You're going to need it now. You're going to need it to make decisions, how to live your life. You can get it for free by going to our website, gotalktruth.com. Click on resources. We'll send one to you in the mail. Alan, this book is important. People have to get it because we got to get stronger.
Yep. That's right. You have to build your life on the solid rock. All other ground is sinking sand, according to the hymn. And that's very, very true. So learn how to get into a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. We'll bring back our guest. His name is Mr. Shawn Buckley. Shawn, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Yesterday's show, if you guys missed it, you need to go back and watch it. It was part one of an incredible testimony. Whistleblower, that's what I like to call her. I mean, how brave do you got to be able to be this young lady who's a nurse? I'm going to go ahead and let you give a little bit of background in case people missed it and then tee it up what we're going to see today.
Yeah, so I mean, we're talking about Sarah Choujounian, who had been working 16 years as a nurse and COVID hits, and one of her jobs was in a nursing home, and she became extremely concerned with how the patients were being treated. She shared with us yesterday how basically the nursing home made the decision that families couldn't visit, and there's a certain percentage of the nursing home population that are completely dependent on their families. And it's just obvious those people are going to die. It's a life and death. And with the others, I mean, it's a significant mental health, which equates to physical health issue. Like it's counterproductive. You're actually putting these people at risk. And she just speaks out about it. And she, shared with us some really awful things. So apparently 3 of the workers in the nursing home, which were just in, what was it? It was laundry or housekeeping. They test positive. They don't have any symptoms. It's just the test. And everyone knows that. There's a certain number of false positives anyway. So, but they lock down the entire institution. So all of these people are locked down in their rooms for 2 entire weeks, and they're not allowed out. And if they're raising a fuss, they're involuntarily sedated. They take away their walkers. And at that, that age, you can't stop walking or you'll lose the ability to walk. I practiced criminal law for decades. And, if you put somebody in solitary confinement, I mean, both national and international law, I mean, you're violating significant law by not allowing them out every 24 hours. And yet, our elderly that are dependent upon us, they get treated worse than criminals under lockdown. Like I'm ashamed.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, how's that even legal? For our health, for our safety, you can bypass the law?
Well, you see, it's not the government, right? Like, so they're...
Yeah, right.
I mean, I guess it could be cruel and unusual, but, you tell me one institution, one person that's being prosecuted for crimes that are committed during COVID. I mean, I think that the government should be liable for what happened. Even just the public messaging, safe and effective. Well, I'm sorry, any one of them could have spent 15 minutes, found the published government order exempting the COVID-19 vaccines from having to be proven safe and effective, and concluded, wait a second, they didn't go through safety testing, they didn't go through efficacy testing. And they were only being tested for, do they reduce symptoms? Right. Why are you requiring us to get, you can't go to a hockey game, you got to have ID papers to get some experimental treatment that may reduce my symptoms temporarily? Like, what? Yeah. Like, this wasn't to help anyone. And yet the way we treated people just so unkindly and created so much harm, but there's no liability.
Yeah, disgusting. Here's part 2 of her story.
Yeah, so when we came back from Washington, I said that we were put under investigation by the college. So this disciplinary hearing is actually derived from that. and there was 12 allegations against me. And so, from, again, the PCR test is not a diagnosis test. I was saying that vaccines are not safe and effective. I was saying that there was alternatives like hydroxychloroquine and vitamin D. I was sharing, some of them are videos of other people talking, other doctors talking. There was something said about how, there's fetal matter in vaccines. So 12 allegations like that, basically.
Right. It's interesting. One of the allegations, and I'll advise the commissioner, so the college put together a table of these, so they've listed them, and we will enter those as exhibits R-070 and R-071. There's two separate pages. But Sarah, one of the allegations is you post a link to an audio file by Dr. Roger Hodgkinson, and we played that on day one of these proceedings on May 30th. So, and had Dr. Hodgkinson as a witness testifying and basically saying today he stands by everything he said. So it's interesting that you're being disciplined for linking to a audio file by an esteemed pathologist who even today says everything he said was correct. So, so what's happening with the college? So you're in the middle of proceedings. Where are you?
Yeah, so it was supposed to be a 7-day trial. Our experts against theirs. We're now at it's going to be day 20 on June 7th. Their experts have gone. My experts are Dr. Pellick, Stephen Pellick, and Dr. Byron Bridle. Both have been only partially, very limitedly qualified. And so we're having a hard time putting the evidence in. Actually, yesterday we had to put in a motion to ask, how can we get this evidence in for when we actually go to court? Because we have to show that we tried and that they didn't let us. So really having a hard time with the case. It's also a public hearing, and they're making it very difficult for people to watch and log in. People have to email them and ask for the links a few days before each court date, or court dates in that same month. And this is a very important case, actually. And in the case, it's shown that everything that I said is now true, pretty much everything. But the problem is that there was no way of me knowing it back then. So it's kind of ridiculous. And the case actually has precedence in Canada for freedom of speech in nursing. So it's actually a very important case. If I lose, nurses, as we saw, would no longer be able to be the last line of defense between the patient and the medical industry. And people would not be able to give an informed consent because we couldn't give all the information. Informed consent means that people know the risks, the benefits, the alternatives, what it does in the body, and they can ask any questions that they want. And this didn't happen. And this is why we spoke out. Nurses in nursing school, in ethics class, the first thing that we learn is that when the medical industry turns against the people, it's our jobs to, I quote, agitate and advocate for what is best for our communities. So I actually did exactly what I was supposed to do, even with all the coercion and intimidation that they did. And so we would completely lose that. As we can see, nurses couldn't speak up and a lot of harm was done. So this is a very important case. If we win, it actually uncensors all the nurses, and we have the power to do our jobs, which is being patient advocates. It's one of our first main responsibilities.
It's curious. It was almost like I didn't hear you correctly, although sadly I know I did. So they're not even saying that you were wrong in what you said. They're saying, well, you couldn't have known it at the time you said it. Did I basically understand that correctly?
100%.
Okay, so I just want the commissioners and those watching your evidence to understand. So you are basically facing currently, I mean, you on yesterday you were in proceedings, which is why you couldn't testify yesterday. So you are currently facing professional misconduct proceedings. You're having to defend yourself with a lawyer. This is serious. For things you said during the pandemic when, in good faith, you were trying to advocate for patients, and you were right, but they're saying, well, you couldn't know that you were right at the time, so we need to discipline you for saying things that turned out to be correct as you were advocating for your patients. Did I sum that up correctly?
Absolutely.
Okay, and then it makes
wanna
perfect sense when I put it that way.
Yeah, crazy. And I just want to add, because what I think made them even more mad is that on December 16, 2020, they sent out an email censoring nurses, telling us that we were not allowed to speak against anything that public health said.
Yes, well, that sounds to be consistent with what we've heard with what other colleges have communicated. So you shared with us basically some fundamental nursing ethics that nurses actually, you were trained, have an ethical obligation to stand up when they see the pharmaceutical industry or anyone else has gotten out of line, and the nurses are the last line of defense for the patient, which is why, so if you get squashed, the message is that any nurses that stand up will be squashed. Is that why this is so important?
Yes.
So how do people support this case that you're in?
This is very important. This is where I'm having, I'm having trouble with everything, basically. But we need for people to be log in and show interest. This is very important for the hearing. I was also told that, when I do take it further up, the judges usually lean towards what the public wants. And so I really need to get public awareness going, but I'm very censored. And so, I need for people to help me or try to log on and watch the case, or just log on at least so that they see that people are there.
Okay, so people, if they're following what's going on, they can be just even the act of watching the proceedings and getting their network to watch the proceedings will send a message to the adjudicator that the public is watching what they're doing. So basically, so that they know that the public is interested, and that in itself would give you support. Yes. Okay.
And people have to email them to get the links, and they can email them at hearingsadministrationgroup@cnomail.org.
And they can also call and email the Ontario College of Nurses and ask how they can follow the proceedings, so that they're signaling that the proceedings are going to be watched. I'm going to ask the commissioners if they have any questions for you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Sarah.
Good evening.
I have a couple of questions. You, as an RN in this facility, you were dealing directly on a one-on-one basis with the residents. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. I have to say that I'm a now my license is suspended, but I was a registered practical nurse.
Okay. So you were essentially on a daily basis interfacing with these residents, and you were observing in real time what was happening and what the effects of the actions of the facility were having on them, correct?
Yes.
What did the attending doctors say to you when you met with them to discuss your patients or your residents each day?
The doctors never came in after the facilities were shut down. Everything was done through Zoom. I didn't hear about or see the doctor. I think once I had to send them pictures of a wound, and he wanted to know the smell. They didn't come in, so we didn't even have the same kind of access to doctors. We can call them as usual and get orders in that way. But doctors stopped coming in when the facilities shut down.
So the facilities are shut down. The residents, in your own words, were under great stress. They were confused. They didn't know what was going on. Some of them were giving up on life. And the doctors didn't come to check on their patients?
Nope.
What about the regulators? How often did you see the regulators coming in to monitor what was going on in the facilities given these unusual times and these lockdowns? How often did the regulators come in and talk to you personally about what was going on with those residents?
Sorry, what do you mean by regulators?
Well, I'm assuming by your question that there weren't representatives from the government, independent representatives visiting the facility to see what was going on and how the patients were doing.
No.
So so Ontario Health, or whatever they're called in Ontario, had, according to your testimony, enacted these measures which, according to your testimony, were known to have deleterious effects on the patients. And yet those same people that enacted those orders weren't coming in to check on the effect of the orders?
No, not that I saw. Not even once.
So apart from yourself then, there was no one there to advocate for these people?
No, well, there's management, they're supposed to, but they definitely weren't.
Did you have daily scrums with management to discuss the individual patients one-on-one?
Nope. Anytime, if we did have any meetings with them, it was about more isolation, more lockdowns, like more restrictions. And that wasn't, again, a problem I had because I complained about that too.
Well, let me ask you a question about that, because you talked about that several times. You said there was lockdowns and 14 days, and if somebody tested positive after the 14 days, it started again. Is that not telling us that lockdowns were not effective if they kept getting infected and they were locked away from their loved ones and they were in isolation? Doesn't that mean that that procedure wasn't working or wasn't effective?
I would think so.
But if it wasn't effective, and in your testimony you said that this had tremendous deleterious effects on these people, because we called them residents or we called them elderly, but what we're talking about is people, are we not?
Absolutely.
So you were saying that they were giving up on life, some people were dying, and it obviously wasn't working because you said that infections kept happening and then they would start the clock again. Why would they continue in a procedure that was so damaging to these people and yet continue it?
Oh, sorry, maybe I misspoke, but in the nursing home where I was, it was just the 3 housekeepers that tested positive. And then after 14 days, they weren't positive anymore. I was kind of put under investigation around that time. And so I wasn't there to see, what happened when the vaccines were given or afterwards. None of my residents had actually tested positive for COVID.
So none of them tested positive for COVID, but they were still locked down. Would it
Yep.
not have been possible to continue to monitor them to see if any COVID was coming in as opposed to just locking them up, considering the effects
Absolutely.
of the lockup?
Absolutely. We even know that residents are more prone to viruses when they're under stress, and that they do better and there's less viruses when their families are around, because they're in a better spirit, they're in a better mood, and their mental health definitely affects their physical health too.
So the doctors weren't there to monitor them in person. There was nobody from Ontario Health coming in to regulate and see what was going on.
No.
You're just on your own.
Yeah, they even stopped doing rehabilitation and physiotherapy. There was no more activities. It was they just had to stay isolated in their rooms. And we know that isolation is really bad for your immune system and can put you at risk for all kinds of things, including viruses.
And you weren't really given an opportunity to report this or discuss this with the nursing association or with the doctors or with what about the people's sons and daughters and grandchildren? Were you not able to contact them and tell them what was going on?
Nobody complained and everybody went with it. I just couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it. There was families that were so adamant about their parents' care and were there every day, and everybody listened. I had maybe one resident's daughter that I spoke to, but she wasn't the power of attorney, and the other daughter didn't feel the same way as her, and so she didn't have a say.
How did they get informed consent from all of these residents or people if they, I'm assuming some of them were not competent to give informed consent?
Informed consent for what?
For any kind of procedure or that was going on at the time. I know you weren't there when the shots were rolled out, but even the care that, I mean, that's a change in care, is it not, when you lock somebody up when they're on a regime of exercise or physiotherapy and you change that and you lock them up? Doesn't someone have to give permission to do that? That's a change in a procedure, is it not?
Yes, but everything was thrown out the window. There was no more rules like that. Everything was, we're in emergency. We have to save these people. We're going to do everything they say, and we are not allowed to ask questions. We were not allowed to ask questions.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but that makes my blood boil. Absolutely boil. I'm glad, Shawn, you got this testimony on recording and that you did what you did at NCI and allowed her to speak, because this is something we can go back and break down after all these years and see how they treated people, the excuses they made, because like Alan said in yesterday's program, this first one, COVID, this last couple of years was a test. I believe there's more coming in the future. And the more we can learn now when we're in between, I think the better. What do you think, Shawn?
Well, just this testimony grieves me. And, you know, we had other testimony about the care of seniors in nurses' homes, but I still can't get my head around, you know, what she said at the first part of her testimony. So I hope your viewers will watch the first show. I mean, a certain percentage of people in nursing homes desperately depend on their families, and it's predictable that they're going to die. And it's predictable that the rest that, you know, aren't so dependent, they're going to have poor health outcomes. And it's just cruel. I mean, locking people in their homes for 14 days is cruel. It makes me sick. I'm ashamed to be a Canadian. I'm ashamed of what happened. And I'm ashamed that nobody's being held to account. I mean, people are still getting, you know, patted on the back. Good job. Thank you for terrorizing our seniors. Like, we're not even having a public discourse about this. And the fact that Sarah, you know, is being professionally disciplined when she's giving the testimony, and how do you deal with, like, I'll ask you guys, how do you deal with the fact, well, they're saying your crime was being right when we didn't have enough evidence to know. You shouldn't have been able to know. Like, so we have to make an example of you so other nurses won't stand up. And this is a test case. Are people going to have informed consent? But your crime is being right?
Yeah. Alan?
You know, I asked myself the question, if there was a family member in a home that, like my family member, like, of course, my mom and dad passed away a while ago. And so to my knowledge, I had no family members in any of these institutions. But if I did have a family member in these institutions, what would I have done? And I am praying to God that I would have gone in almost the first day of the lockdown and packed up the bags of my loved one and took them home. And, you know, I don't care what the cost. I would not allow that to happen. You just can't allow that to happen. And the problem is we're so... We're almost intoxicated, you know, we're almost drugged as Canadians, even as Christians, that we don't even think of these things during the time. Because I know good people that had loved ones, you know, in the home, and, you know, they did what they could, but they were trying to be law-abiding citizens. But we're trying to be law-abiding citizens in a unlaw-abiding situation. This is an attack on humanity. And we didn't view it as that because they use it as hospitals. They use it through the doctors. They used it through the medical situation. So it was an attack, a military attack on our people. And if they would have come in bayonets and guns, we would have known how to handle it. But because they come in a white smock and come under the guise of an emergency, a disease is going to kill everybody, through fear, they control us. And like I said before yesterday, this was an exercise. An exercise. That's said to me by an Alberta health official. You know, it says to me that, hello, we as God's people have got to get to the place where we're really hearing God, where we're understanding God, where we draw close to the Lord, because he is the one that is going to set us free. And he is the only one that's going to set us free. And I think all of us, leaders, people, everybody needs to, you know, get to the fact that we cannot ever let this happen to us again.
Yeah.
And it's like, what are we doing to prepare ourselves for the next time?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, the fear was so pervasive that it was crazy. And he hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and discipline. And you know, remember in Quebec, some people in an old folks' home starved to death because the staff was too afraid to go and feed them. And that actually happened in Canada during COVID. I mean, I think as a nation, we need to understand that we became cowards and we need to be ashamed.
Yeah. But they released the prisoners. They let them out of jail. Anyway. Shawn, thank you so much for being here on the show. Thank you so much for the National Citizens Inquiry, for putting this on tape. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing your testimony. You're so brave. And Shawn, we'll definitely have you back.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate what you guys are doing here, trying to get the truth out.
You want to help support our mission, keep this truth on the air. We are viewer supported. And we ask that you would ask Father God if he wants you to be a partner with us. And if he says yes, then please do so. Go to our website, gotalktruth.com, click on the donate button. If you'd like to do it through the mail, give a gift through the mail, you can. You can make the check payable to Heritage Christian Ministries Association and send it to 246 Stewart Green, Southwest, Suite 3260, Calgary, Alberta, T3H 3C8. And if you'd like prayer, we have a toll-free number for you, 1-800-915-0056 in Canada. All right, Dad, we're out of time. We'll definitely see you guys later.
And we definitely love you.